justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to live.
Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Justice. Good afternoon and happy Monday to all our listeners who are joining us on YouTube and those who are joining us on Radioland. My name is Michael Jackson, Executive Director of JFJ.
And I'm Jade Williams, Policy Research and Advocacy Manager at JFJ.
So we're going to be having an important conversation on just generally the right to express ourselves freely, but in a responsible manner, free of criminalization, to put it in a way that the public can understand and appreciate, right? So we're going to be looking at how we can address harmful misinformation without state overreach. And we have some very, very exciting guests. Jade?
Yes, we have joining us Mr. Gary Allen, who's the president of the Media Association, Dashawn Hendricks, who's the president of the Press Association of Jamaica, and we also have Chukwu Mecca Cameron, attorney at law, who will also be joining us in studio to have this discussion.
All right, great. So before we get into the topic of this week, a little bit of a sad news for us. Maybe good news for Daniel. That's Miss Danielle Archer, the Principal Director of National Integrity Action. It's now in the public domain that Miss Archer has resigned with effective December 31 as Principal Director of National Integrity Action, NIA. And let me put on record that JFJ, we have worked closely with Miss Archer in this capacity and will continue to do so until she officially steps down in December. Let me say my personal respect for Danielle, respect and admire her strength, how fierce she is, how reasonable she is when she puts forward the positions that she makes on behalf of NIA. Someone I have personal respect and regard for, and I will personally miss her a lot because we have worked rather closely during her tenure. And Danielle, walk good. I've sent you my personal regards on WhatsApp, and I'm sure we will speak soon. Right?
Yes.
All right. So just to quickly go into the week that was, for those who have been following the news cycle, there was a headline in the Jamaica Observer that is titled "Inhumane and Undignified," and it speaks to the state of our lockups, where Custos Stedman Fuller, who was speaking to some 80 justices of the peace, and he made note about the inhumane conditions that detainees continue to suffer through. And it's something that JFJ, we have spoken about as well. We read in that article where, according to Custos Fuller, you have 12 detainees in a 6x4 cell. And then in very close days, we saw another news article where the Member of Parliament for St. Mary, following a detainee who was stabbed, I believe, by other detainees. But what the MP took note of is, again, the matter of overcrowding. And that was by the Another Bay Police lockup, where at one point he indicated that a space that should have 12 persons had some 50 there. And if you remember, again, JFJ, if you remember a couple episodes ago, we had Matthew Hyatt and some other attorneys on this program who were lamenting about the state of the lockups, overcrowding, the fact that people had nowhere to properly lay their heads, people sleeping on concrete. Even to relieve themselves, you did not have proper facilities because you had to defecate in a bucket and so on, and that bucket is not removed from where you're sleeping. So that level of undignified condition, goes against the principle of people being in dignity while in the custody of the state. And it's something that we do urge our government to take note of. I think it is important that we make move in ensuring that when we can have people released and not unnecessarily so detained, but we have to build more facilities that are, again, in humane conditions. And I want to, also support a statement made by Custos Fuller that it is important that JPs fulfill their duties in ensuring that where they see these levels of human rights violations, they make it known. That is a critical function of our justice of the peace. I just wanted to put my own support and JFJ's behind Custos Fuller's comments and calls.
All right, thank you for that, Mikhail. So I think we will go straight into our right of the week this week, which comes from our Defamation Act 2013, and it speaks to when you can publish information. So, when you can have an action for a publication. So it states that a person has a single cause of action for defamation in relation to the publication of any defamatory matter. So that's anything that would be false and would affect this person's reputation or their standing in the public. So if you have a defamatory matter, a statement, a video, whatever it is, and there are multiple pieces of defamation within it, you can only take one action on the matter itself, the document, the video, whatever it is. You would not be able to take separate actions for each instance of defamation that happens within that matter. Another thing is that you can bring an action for defamation without proof of special damage. So you don't actually have to experience harm in order to bring an action for defamation. But if you don't experience harm, the kind of remedies that you might get, even if you win the action, might be limited. We also have a trivia question for today, which asks, what is the name of the legislation that the Defamation Act 2013 replaced? So you can respond in our YouTube chat. You can send a WhatsApp to 2397583, or you can send an Instagram message to JA4Justice.
All right, so we're getting straight into the show. So we heard a comment made by former cabinet member, who is a former Legal and Constitutional Affairs Minister, Marlene Malahoo Fort, who raised some concerns regarding perceived rise in online harms, particularly through social media, including bullying, harassment, stalking, and defamatory attacks. I believe the comments were made following statements by the Gender Minister, Olivia Babsy-Grange, around how women, or victims rather generally, are experiencing online attack within the context of gender-based violence. So in response to this perceived rise, Member of Parliament Marlene Malahoo Fort recommended the reintroduction of criminal libel, and this provision repealed 13 years ago, that was in 2013, allows for criminal charges to be laid against a person for making a permanent defamatory statement.
The repeal of these provisions were heavily welcomed as a boost to press freedom and to freedom of expression. Under our current legislative framework, as I just read, it's a civil matter and no longer a criminal one. So you can sue for damages and receive financial compensation or other kinds of compensation, but there would be no criminal prosecution.
So the concerns we're going to be raising with our guest is really, we do recognize that there is misinformation and disinformation in our country and our context globally, but what exactly is the right fit? We're going to be explaining with our guest what exactly obtains currently in law. And by the way, just to put in context that I believe it was a year or two ago, we heard that you may have hate speech legislation being introduced, and I personally caution that if you don't even have adequate protections in the Constitution for various special characteristics of individual, for example, sexual orientation, I'm not sure what a hate speech would do within that context if you are fearful of even moving forward those protections for marginalized groups. We also heard that you would have what was a fake news law,
yes,
being proposed at one point, and now we're here again. And I'm very personally a little bit cautious about when you hear governments proposing these elements to be passed. But again, it's a real issue, so what exactly is the fix? So do we have our guest on?
Yes, so we have Mr. Gary Allen, and of course we have Mr. Cameron in studio with us. So yeah, we wait to get Mr. Hendricks.
Yeah, I think we can start with Mr. Cameron. Just to explain to our listeners, before we get into the challenges of the proposal for those who may have concerns with it, I want you to explain to our listeners very briefly what obtains in law now if it is somebody were to go on social media, tell lies about me or make threatening comments, what obtains in law at this point?
There are two separate issues that you just raised. One, that of defamation, and two, threats.
Yes.
So, as it relates to defamation today, if it is you were to write something and have it published, and one person were to receive that publication, either on social media or in the newspaper or on a piece of paper, and share it with a third party, you are exposed to a civil suit where you can be sued for damages for lowering the reputation of that individual in the eyes of the public. That's what currently obtains. If it is you were to make a threatening state, threaten someone, that's a straight criminal act. There is no, and we want to be very clear when we are distinguishing misinformation, defamation, and threats.
Absolutely.
Because I noticed in the conversations, everything was conflated into one. So we don't want to disaggregate the issues.
Yes, yes. And I'm happy you asked that, because I was saying to Jade, I've personally gone on YouTube and I see 2 hour and hour long videos making certain allegations of me and threatening comments. And matters, I believe one of the matter, Jade, you assisted in making a complaint to the police. And despite what I believe and the attorneys believe were threatening comments, they said that, listen, I can't do anything, go and move forward with a civil suit. So for our listeners who are very much concerned that people are out there just, and again, I'm happy that we're talking and differentiating between the two, because again, I think it's being conflated. So if you make a threat, you have common law that would deal with it, offense against the Persons Act that will deal with it, and you do have the cybercrime legislation that will deal with that threatening comment, if you will.
That's correct. The question is whether or not the Cybercrimes Act is sufficient to adequately deal with it. It just went through a round of amendments recently, but there still are some questions left hanging, because what the state needs to be looking at is how do we incentivize appropriate behavior and protect citizens. So a threat on the internet, a threat in person, we must have mechanisms in place to minimize that and protect our citizens.
All right, great. So we're upon the break. So when we return, we touch base with Mr. Allen and Mr. Hendricks. All right, so we take the break.
It's Monday, get over your blues. Or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. The E-Zone is here for you. With the Stinger Honey Bee
and Karim Boyatings
from 3 to 5 p.m. on Nationwide 90 FM.
We've got your entertainment news.
Then we want to hear your views. Why you said?
Jump in the mix.
Or the hot seat.
Don't miss our brain busters.
Or the crazy giveaways.
Let's talk fashion.
Send us your outfit of the day. Ooh, cutesy. Very demure.
Are you looking for love?
Come on one of our blind dates. Send your request to ezoneblindates@gmail.com. That's ezoneblindates@gmail.com.
And stay tuned for your confessions.
These are my confessions.
Share them with us at ezoneconfessions@yahoo.com. I mean, is this planet Earth?
Is it?
I don't know. Let me check. Either way, it's got a buzz.
And a bugger thing.
Ow! Ow!
What's everyone talking about? It's Front Page in This Morning. Get the issue of the day this and every weekday morning at 7:20 a.m. on Front Page. This Morning. Morning radio the right way. Front Page is brought to you by ABC Electrical for a better choice in the electrical business.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. We're discussing the matter of criminal libel and freedom of speech and what exactly that means to be done in a responsible manner. And for those who spread misinformation and disinformation, what exactly is the appropriate channel. Mr. Allen, thank you so much for joining. So to resume with you, I believe you describe this proposal that it has the potential to have a chilling effect on press freedom. Can you just explain for the listeners what exactly are the concerns being raised? You're a little low.
Not
Yes, hearing you
sure.
now. Perfect.
Is that any better? Not sure if I can boost my audio on this end. I don't know.
I believe you're clear now.
Is
You're
that
okay
better
now. Yes.
Okay, good. All right. Thank you very much. Now, we have some history here, and history is generally a very good guide today about the future. And we have had a history where criminal libel, defamation that is criminalized, has been used in a way by authorities to stifle freedom of the press, freedom of expression, free speech in general. And it is something that we celebrated in 2013 when we finally had criminal defamation removed from our statutes. And to think that in 12 years, we are back at a place where we are talking about the possibility of considering the reintroduction of something that we took decades to remove from our books is quite worrisome. From the journalistic standpoint, it is something that the chilling effect is essentially where the journalist is so afraid that they may cross the line and say something or make a mistake on a matter or get information that is usually from reliable sources and documentation. But if it is found to be inaccurate in any way or not 100% on all fours, that they could actually find themselves being imprisoned. Not a matter now of their institution that they work for that published it, but the individual being imprisoned for publishing something that is not accurate and lowered the reputation of someone. So that causes them to self-censor, and it causes them not to want to investigate and to tiptoe around issues that are of importance to the society, but they are afraid to go there. So that's what we mean when we talk about the chilling effect that it can have on a profession. And let's not forget that we have had instances of criminal defamation within our region and things used against journalists within our region. So it is not far-fetched.
You know, there was a case that I was researching when this matter was last brought up. In the 70s, somebody said communism a come to Jamaica, and was brought before the courts for this very issue of, criminal defamation, and it was against the state. So that matter of state overreach and knowing one's history is important, because how dare you criticize the government that communism is nearing our shores and our context. So it's important that we start, again, as you just rightly outlined, from a state of history. But just to go back to Mr. Cameron, for, I listened to MP Malahoo Fort. I believe she was speaking on Cliff Hughes Online. And she made the point that, listen, she understands that at the time it needed to be removed from our books. But now that we're in 2025, where people can go on X, Instagram, and so on, how do you deal with it? And is the recommendation as made by her so chilling that we should not be looking at criminalizing that mis and disinformation? Mr. Cameron.
Okay, so we're making a distinction. We're no longer speaking about defamation, but we're now speaking about misinformation and disinformation.
Well, I think the defamation perhaps is the end result of the mis and the disinformation.
No, I'll deal with them separately. As it relates to defamation, to reintroduce, to criminalize defamation again is a retrograde step. And there, we don't need to have an emotive discussion or even historical. What our Constitution requires is that we take an empirical approach. If it is you are going to restrict one's freedom of expression or freedom of movement, Parliament must present empirical evidence of the damage that is being done, and the proposed solution would in fact curb that damage. Having presented that empirical data, the next step is to demonstrate that it is indeed necessary and proportionate. To determine whether or not it's necessary, you have to prove that there is no other remedy or solution available. And when we determine whether or not there is it proportion? Is locking up someone, taking away one's freedom, proportionate to the objective you are trying to achieve? So that is in relation to when you lower an individual in the eyes of the community. When it speaks to misinformation and disinformation, that is a totally separate issue. The World Economic Forum has stated in a report dated 2025 that misinformation and disinformation is a challenge, is a threat facing all modern democracies. And currently, you have to go through the same test if it is you're going to restrict someone's right. Is it a real danger? Does it have the ability to destabilize a country? Yes. Should defamation laws deal with it? No, that's a separate issue. When we speak, do we have adequate laws in place? Can our Cybercrimes Act deal with it? Can our Data Protection Act deal with it?
And the Access to Information Act as well.
And the Access to Information Act. We may even be looking at non-legal remedies. We want to be actively exploring, and when you listen to the comment of the Prime Minister, when he said, if you post, I can post. If you post a meme, I am going to post a meme. That is the best response to misinformation. Information. So yes, you do have to go to war on getting out, on fighting misinformation, because the best response is one, education, ensuring our public is literate. And when I say literate, can apply critical thinking into how they receive and consume information. Then we build out, ensure that's embedded in our educational system. I don't remember, but in some Scandinavian country, that is a part of your core curriculum, just the ability to discern what is truthful and what is not. So we can look at criminal or legal solutions, but I would suggest, and we have gone on the road, and even non-legal remedies would have a much more far-reaching and long-term impact to combat misinformation and disinformation.
You know, I wanted to ask if you are aware of how other jurisdictions, if they have targeted misinformation and disinformation in this particular way, and what they did in particular.
So Pakistan is one country that I looked at, and Pakistan has, as I said, this is a scourge fighting all developing and modern democracies. So Pakistan really went out and bolstered their institutions and their ability to put out information. But they did not get the response that they wanted. It is when they started having a feedback loop built into the information that they were putting out that we started to see something more impactful. If we were to look up north, I don't know if we recall when there was the fires in California.
Yes.
And then Governor Newsom, he was on a professional platform, and he was bombarded with all of the memes and misinformation coming out of the White House. And he was totally frustrated. 1 year fast forward to today, what has he done? He has engaged fully in the platforms that are used to communicate and the style of communication. So what is necessary is, one, as I said, learning how to counter it, but we need to use a language that the public uses. If it's through memes, we use memes. If it's through slang, we use slang, whatever the case is. But the legal remedy may not necessarily achieve that objective. So Pakistan is one example, and California is another example of how you treat with misinformation. You go to war with misinformation. You post one meme, you fire back another meme as fast as the misinformation came out.
Thank you so much. To Mr. Allen, you know, I heard you mention the chilling effect, but we do have instances sometimes of media practitioners not perhaps doing the type of due diligence that would be necessary to maintain that trust in the press. How do you deal with that misinformation? I'm not talking disinformation now where it's deliberate, but how you deal with the misinformation, and again, is a legal route necessary in some instances? How do you address that particular criticism?
Well, I think that there are two things. If I could back up a bit, I would want to take one additional step in Chuck's points just now, which is that I think that we generally go after things after there's a problem and then try to back into a solution. And really, if we had proper public education about the things that we are doing and what we would like the public to understand, we would make sure that people are armed with proper information first, so they can actually dismiss a lot of the foolishness that comes up. So I think that proper public education accompanying anything that we are doing is something that is lacking in our space. I don't think that we have an effective public broadcasting system that actually is broad enough that addresses that kind of issue. And I think that we should invest more in having good, reliable, credible, not government, but public information that the populace can rely on for their information needs. If we have that kind of credibility, then we are halfway to solving the issue, because people will themselves be better informed to dismiss a lot of what is heard. To the point of within the profession.
Hold that thought for me, Mr. Allen. My apologies. We're up on the break, and then we pick up with you.
What's everyone talking about? It's Front Page in This Morning. Get the issue of the day this and every weekday morning at 7:20 a.m. on Front Page. This Morning. Morning radio the right way. Front Page is brought to you by ABC Electrical, for a better choice in the electrical business.
Tune in to Nationwide 90 FM with Pepita and Honeybee from 3 to 5 p.m. as we broadcast live from Megamart Waterloo, Saturday, December 20. Pepita and Honeybee plus Megamart equals a festive customer appreciation celebration. Join us at Megamart Waterloo for the customer appreciation festivities, samplings, entertainment, and more. Pepita and Honeybee are doing it mega with Megamart. Come be part of the mega broadcast with Pepita and Honeybee, Saturday, December 20, 2025 at Megamart Waterloo from 3 to 5 p.m. only on Nationwide 90 FM, the new revolution in media.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. We're discussing an important issue of criminal libel and freedom of expression, and how to really deal with the issue following a proposal made by former cabinet member Marlene Malahoo Fort. Mr. Allen, before the break, you expressed so well the importance of having a public broadcasting system, if for lack of a better terminology, that deals with ensuring that the public is equipped with information, so that when you see nonsense, you know how to dispel of them quickly. And you're about to answer the question about how to deal with misinformation among your peers by the media practitioners.
Absolutely. No, any journalistically driven organization has to always be striving for accuracy. There's no gainsaying that if you are a news operation and you are trading in inaccuracies and have to be constantly apologizing for stuff and so on, that you know that you're taking a hit every time to your credibility, that you have to go out there and say, I withdraw this story, or you apologize for something. So we have to, if we are serious about our journalism, always invest in the people that are practicing the journalism. And unfortunately, over the years, we have not invested as much in the actual human side of the business as some of us want to and need to make sure that we get top quality journalism on a consistent basis. And very often, I would go as far as to say that the overwhelming majority of cases where there has been defamation and there is action that is actually upheld by the court, it is about careless errors. It is not about malice. It is not about somebody setting up to make somebody look bad. It is actually about making foolish mistakes in terms of the verification of information that you have gotten, in terms of the triangulation of the information that you have gotten. So it is on the profession side also the training and the improvement of skills that are necessary for that. Now, when we come in the space of what is happening today with what goes on in social media and so on and so forth, and some of the recklessness and the absolute astonishing stuff that people say, that is unforgivable. And there ought to be ways to deal with that. I just don't think that the way to deal with it is through reintroduction of criminal libel. I go even further to say that I am willing to wager that the majority of people who make the most outlandish claims and statements in social media do not live in this jurisdiction. They live elsewhere. The defamation laws elsewhere are different, especially up north, quite different to the defamation laws that we have in Jamaica, even when we had criminal defamation. Mm-hmm. And so you could have people in jurisdictions where it is fine to say the things that they say, especially about public officials. And public officials is more than just politicians. And it would not be defamatory in their jurisdiction, but in Jamaica, it would be. Now, the question is, if you reintroduce criminal defamation in Jamaica, and a lot of those people are outside of your reach, what is the solution that you're providing to the situation in Jamaica when these are people in another jurisdiction who have access because of globalization and the internet and all of the new technologies to our space? So it is complex, and we ought not to look at it as a way that we can take Jamaica's 4,411 square miles and see if we can treat it in this globalized environment as a space that we can regulate in a way that is not impacted by what's happening outside.
Thank you so much. And you raised on something that I want to ask before we go to Mr. Cameron with a similar question. While I appreciate the intent of the proposal of dealing with this issue, I can't help but wonder what the potential state overreach could very well be. So in other words, if I remove the conversation now from public officials, if I make a statement that a politician does not like, what exactly is the potential for state overreach in such a situation? Starting with you, Mr. Allen.
Well, I think that there are a few things that we ought to recall when it comes to the broadcasting sector, that's radio and television, and also when it comes to the other arms of telecommunications. They operate on the basis of licensing. Licensing ultimately comes through the authorities. So you may have regulators, and the regulators make recommendations, and then it is the politicians in their policy role that will grant permission. You could very well, if we get back into a situation where there is this kind of difficulty, we could have a situation where if people don't like what is said, Licenses for radio or television stations could be in jeopardy. Licenses for certain other services in telecommunications could be in jeopardy. If it gets to the point where there is the perceived view that someone wants to do something about something that they didn't like from a particular source. That is a real issue, because that then goes to continuity of your business certainty, the people you employ, do they have a job? How does that impact on what happens going forward? That is a real area of concern. So just from a business standpoint, that's the first thing that would jump at you. I feel a little bit constrained to make the point that although I disagree with the base of the premise that MP Malahoo Ford has put forward, and I have said in discussions, including with her, that absolutely not in terms of going back the route of criminal defamation. She did skillfully ask a question of the Gender Affairs Minister. She didn't actually make a proposal to say that we should go back to this. And I think she's taking a bit of a rap for saying she's proposing something when she actually haven't made the proposal. And in fact, in a discussion I had with her publicly, she said that she has raised the point, but she hasn't actually settled on whether it should or should not be. So I would want to take advantage of her not settling on where she's going, to keep it in the middle and to say, Minister, come on my side. Let's find some other ways, but don't go back the route of criminal defamation.
Yes, she made that very clearly, and I think, thank you so much, Mr. Allen, that we should actually make note that she posed a question whether or not this is a possible action or step to take, rather than saying that it's a settled position. Yes. Please continue.
Right. So I mean, essentially, my point is that the entire ecosystem, as we know it, could change in terms of policy, in terms of regulatory approach, in terms of our business activities, if we were to venture upon these kinds of challenges. And therefore, we believe that, yes, look at other laws, look at how you introduce issues to do with when you identify who the person is and if they are in your jurisdiction, and if malice was actually intended to go the route of community service activity and so on. If you believe that the person actually needs to have compensation beyond the financial compensation that they can now have. So let's understand that what we're talking about is you still have the ability to sue for damages, and you don't have to prove it is the person who you sue. If it is a media house, the media house has to prove their innocence. Everybody else is guilty until proven innocent. In these instances, a media house is sued, journalist is sued, the journalist has to prove his innocence or her innocence. It is, as I understand it, one of the few, if not the only case in which the person who is accused of doing the wrong has to be the person who demonstrates their case of innocence rather than the other way around. But if that happens, we then have to come to the point where there is damages that is paid. But this one says you could have that, but you could also still go to prison if the criminal one is allowed to be reintroduced. So it could be criminal go to prison and also damages pay money as a separate cause of action. And that is not something conducive to freedom of expression in any society.
And the importance of media as that fourth estate,
we are seeing that absolutely, and we are seeing that only too well today in what has happened with Hurricane Melissa. Yesterday I was in Westmoreland, and for the last 5 weekends we have been in different areas, and the people there do not have a consistent flow of information about what is to happen and is happening with them, because there is no reliable, credible, consistent public broadcasting service, no proper public education that is going on, telling them about how, when, and where they can do this, that, and the other. People, birth certificate gone, and they need to know how to get a new birth certificate. When their passport is destroyed, they need to know how, when to get back a passport. What we're talking about with health conditions and leptospirosis, the people who are getting the information, we are in the areas that are not badly affected. The people in those areas have a gap. So we need to look at how public education, public service broadcasting can help to build that and to build a stronger platform for improving public awareness and understanding of issues, including those that would be a natural firewall against a lot of misinformation and disinformation.
Thank you. Mr. Cameron, the same question to you. If we were to introduce criminal libel, what do you think the potential is there for state overreach?
So I think it goes back to the whole premise of the chilling effect. So we don't have to even worry about actual state overreach, just the idea of being exposed to criminal liability demonstrates that is the impact of the state overreach. So the part I really want us to focus on is, one, what are the considerations when seeking to restrict any fundamental right? Because even the thought of asking a question of that nature, as a legislator, you're not a member of the public asking Parliament, what do you think about this? No, you are a legislator, you do form part of the government. So what is expected and what I'm advocating for is how we legislate. So we got a very good roadmap coming out of the NIDS decision. When the government of the day sought to introduce the bill and the entire bill was struck down, our constitutional court set out what your considerations must be when seeking to restrict a fundamental right. So for me, it raises above the whole freedom of journalism, government overreach. We are speaking about how do we protect the fundamental rights that all citizens enjoy, and parliamentarians who have the power to restrict those rights at the stroke of a pen. What should that approach be? So from my perspective, I don't want us to get lost on government overreach. Chilling effect on the media is a substantial issue. But how do we ensure that Parliament follows that roadmap that was outlined by our Chief Justice when we're speaking about any act that seeks to restrict the right of a Jamaican citizen? Because yes, we're thinking about the impact that it may have, the ultimate impact it may have on a listener or consumer of information if a media house is impacted. But the fundamental issue is, how does such a law impact on that individual whose right to freedom is going to be restricted as a result of him exercising a right that the Constitution gives him? So I want us to start having mature discussions in Parliament when we are considering any legislation that is going to restrict a right. So it's, as I've indicated, I've heard what the Member of Parliament has said, but you are not a bystander sitting in the arena asking a question. No, you're a member of the government, you're a legislator. And a preferred approach is, this is the research that has been done. This is the impact this specific action is having. What minister are we seeking to treat with this? But in asking a question that presents a solution, it's no semantics when we say there is no proposal. So I'm not going to detain myself with that. The reality is, how does the Fourth Estate, how does Parliament itself ensure that the requisite steps are followed when they think about introducing any law that would restrict the right? Is the right to freedom or freedom of expression absolute? Not at all. And when we're looking at the negative impact misinformation and disinformation will have and is having, steps have to be taken. But let us understand the construct that and the sort of conversations that we should be having. And this is a sort of public education that is also necessary when we are engaging members of the public to think about this legislation that is being put forward. What should they be thinking about when they are asked to consult? Because yes, they would go through a public consultation process more often than not. But we need to move. Yes, we must represent our constituency. But even in representing our constituency, we want to be able to frame our concerns in a manner that is recognized by the parliamentary process, and more importantly, in a manner that respects the rights to each individual.
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement. So as we close out, we'll just take last words. Mr. Allen, starting with you, and then we'll end with Mr. Cameron.
Well, thank you very much. Now, whether the minister's question was a proposal or not a proposal, my position on it remains the same. The idea of the reintroduction of criminal defamation in any shape or form in the Jamaican space is something that the Media Association Jamaica Limited is absolutely opposed to. The chilling effect that it could have on the practice of journalism is something that is alive and still there. The challenges that are presented by the democratization of information flows and globalization, all of that they have a bearing on what we do in society today. We need more public education, more public awareness. People need to understand and be empowered to themselves dismiss foolishness as foolishness, garbage as garbage, inciting of action. They should be able to tell people to go away with foolishness like that. And they can only do that if they are empowered with adequate information, not if they are threatened with being incarcerated for the spoken word, not as a citizen and not as a member of the journalism profession. So we stand against it, and we encourage that there is more public education to make our citizens more empowered with information rather than fearful of saying anything for fear of being locked up.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Cameron?
Let us take a citizen or human-centered approach and determine how can we empower our citizens to discern information that they receive. How can we empower our citizens to take advantage of these new communication technologies that exist, to use them in a responsible way?
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. So we just heard from Mr. Chuck Cameron, attorney at law, data rights practitioner, correct? That's your new title. And Mr. Gary Allen, president of the Media Association of Jamaica. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time. All right. So, I'm quite happy with the conversation because some of the things said by our guest, for the most part, we completely agree. The last time the matter was raised, we had called for the PBC, the GIS to do more from the state. And the matter of the Access to Information Act, J, that we're looking at, and we're going to be launching our report in January, and the public is invited. We'll talk more about that. Mm-hmm. The matter of proactive disclosure. Mm-hmm. So, for example, I heard the Prime Minister mentioning that he's going to be going to war. And the war that he mentioned is the war of information against the misinformation. Mm-hmm. And I said, absolutely, that is what should have been coming from the state in the first place.
Yes.
So, for example, if your political opponents are saying that contracts are being issued to who it should not be issued to, what we would have liked is that you had a mechanism, a website, that I could readily go on and see all of those contracts that were issued, who they were issued to, and the monetary value of those contracts. That's what we mean by proactive disclosure. Mm-hmm. So it removes room for the mis and the disinformation. So we completely agree that you need to have that public access to information that people can discern for themselves what exactly is the truth.
Yes.
And we have to be careful where we seek our information, listeners, because, I can tell you, colleagues, my friends, my mother, she knows that I will block for a few hours if certain nonsense come to my cell phone. But sometimes we don't even know how to dispel nonsense because we just don't know better. So the empowerment of our people, I believe, is where we need to start before we get to, some of that proposed legislation that we're talking about.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. I think one of the most important points for me was Mr. Cameron speaking to the need to know why we are asking for legislative changes. I think being a lot of persons, we don't realize how much we're in a small little bubble. Mm-hmm. So we might think that something is happening at a scale that it is not happening at. And maybe not at a scale that requires a legislative solution, right? But I do think that there is merit in us really not being anecdotal about issues that we intend to address legislatively. And that brings me to, I think we previously had this thought when we looked at other proposed, which ended up going through legislative amendments like to the bail legislation. And we were concerned as to what the mischief that we were trying to solve was, and we never really got that response, and we never really saw any data, but legislation was passed anyway. And we can see...
I know anecdotally we're seeing here at JFJ where it is seemingly being abused.
Exactly. But even so, some of the things that we were concerned about, like the overcrowding that we discussed earlier in the show, we can see where having the legislation that we did end up getting would have increased those challenges. And so it would have been useful if we were to see some justification for its use and why the provision was changed to this way. So I can really understand that reasoning.
Jaden, I had a conversation via DM with an ex-user, Twitter, mm-hmm. who is in strong support of the legislation. So I just screenshot a comment that the person had made against me specifically. And I said, boy, if this legislation was passed, you'd be first in line. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, you should thank God I'm not someone who just out there with lawsuits against you. Because the person in that moment didn't even realize, and I think it's, towing the political line, that what they're in support of, they're guilty of doing.
Yes.
And it's something that we have to take note of as to what we're supporting. Are we, and this goes across both political parties, are we supporting based on, political lesions, so to speak, and support? Or are we looking at the issues objectively? And I'm not saying with anything with MP Malo Fort, don't misunderstand me. I'm talking generally what we're proposing and what we're supporting as people, that we have to be careful about the far-reaching impact that it may very well have on our democracy. As you rightly said, you're trying to fix one thing, but you create another challenge. It's something that we have to take note of and what happens. Yes. I think I shared with you, I was a part of a conference in another country with several of us across countries, journalists, human rights defenders, and we had to leave our cell phones in a room that was far from the conference room that we were at for the day, because we had journalists, one of whom she was imprisoned in her country because of speaking out against the government. These are real things when you look at what happened in Bangladesh with journalists, for example. How dare you speak against the state and what that means. So you're in prison for a few days, years in some instances. So we have to take note of what happened elsewhere to see, are we creating that avenue, that space? Yes. And it has happened before. So let's not fool ourselves. Sometimes I think the young people benefit from the strength of our democracy today.
Yes.
That they don't realize the weakness of our democracy in the 70s and the 80s and what we could potentially revert to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So as we close out in a few minutes, Wednesday is Human Rights Day.
Yes.
And as we celebrate, these are the things we need to be mindful of, what our constitutional rights are, what we have in law now, and what we need to further call on. And boy, I wish for the day when our people are generally excited about constitutional reform. Because, for example, we're having this conversation now about criminal defamation, but we don't have freedom of the press in our constitution.
Yes.
And our strength of free press is there because we had that 2013 repeal under the administration of Bruce Golding.
Yes.
And I think we have to be careful that we strengthen our democracy through constitutional reform and not have a regressive move being introduced. But, much more, and we'll give a statement on Human Rights Day about where JFJ's position is.
Yes, I would also like to say to our listeners, on Human Rights Day, we will be at Sir William Grant Park with several other stakeholders, including E4Life, including Gen Plus, including some of our state stakeholders
Expungement,
as well.
if you want to hear about that,
MOJ
come on down.
will be
Yes,
there with the Social Justice Division, so you can come down, get your information. I think we'll also have testing on site on the day. So
that's HIV testing.
HIV testing, yes. So you can come and join us, Sir. Help me, Michael.
The park is just simply St. William Grant.
St. William Grant Park.
That's
Thank you.
the heart of downtown Kingston, between 1 and 5 p.m. and you can just come on down, all right?
All right. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm Jade Williams.
And I'm Michael Jackson. Have yourselves a wonderful, wonderful rest of week.
As a parent, you give your children a good start in life. You nurture, protect, and guide them. Parenting is a process that prepares your child for independence. As your child